Okay, we are live. Hello,
And good morning.
everybody.
How
This
are
is,
you?
yeah, I'm very good. So I'm here. My name is Christian Peverelli. I am the CEO of We Are No Code, and I'm accompanied here today by Leonard Lenzi, who is a phenomenal guy. But on top of that, he has had probably the longest history of experience in Los Angeles with entrepreneurship and training startups, mentoring, building his own companies. He was running LAVA, the Los Angeles Venture Association, and is currently the managing director of Precelerator, which is a pre-accelerator program in Los Angeles. Len, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm always happy to come on and talk about the wonderful things our ecosystem's doing and the history and how things have progressed over time. It's been a remarkable, almost 15 years now working in the tech scene.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you're very well respected in this scene as well. So thanks
Well,
for
you're very
everything you've
kind. I don't know if
contributed.
everybody would agree with you with that, but you're very kind. And there certainly are other people who have been in this and at this much longer than I. But I think I have a pretty good perspective of how our tech scene, our ecosystem. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Has progressed over the past 15 years.
Awesome. So yeah, let's start out by why don't you tell us a little bit more about Precelerator, what you're trying to accomplish, and then we'll jump straight into the meat.
Absolutely. So the Precelerator program was started about 7 years ago by a local law firm, Stubbs, Alderton, and Markleys. Started the Precelerator program as an experiment. They had some extra office space in Santa Monica. They had some companies that they were working with as clients. They said, "Okay, let's bring them in house and see if we can help them along with our resources, our attorneys' resources, and our ecosystem." And they found that worked out quite well to the point that they wanted to formalize the program, both as a marketing tactic to bring new clients to the firm, but also to serve the greater community with really an incubation program at first. And the difference between an incubator and an accelerator is typically accelerators are giving hard cash as an investment, and incubators typically are not. Although they weren't charging the companies to be there, it was a free service. And as it progressed, the offering today is a 6-month term with us in our co-working space and a prime location right on the promenade in Santa Monica, California. You can't ask for a better space. I'm still looking forward to getting back in there, hopefully next month. And we have a mentor ecosystem of about 80 to 100 mentors that spend office hours. They're required to spend office hours with our cohorts and offer those consultings free of charge. We have a perks program that we've negotiated with AWS and Facebook Startup and HubSpot and Sendio and SendGrid and a whole bunch of other services. Worth about $400,000 or $500,000 available to our cohorts. We actually invest $25,000 into the company as an equity play, and we also offer $25,000 of free legal transactional services to our cohort companies. So
Very
for
cool.
that, we take a piece of equity to make it worth our while. And we have 47 companies in the portfolio. Only 6 have actually had a cash investment because that's somewhat recent as the Precelerator has grown and progressed. And so, out of the 47 companies, just look at the ecosystem. The failure rate of companies within this process is pretty high. And, I love quoting this statistic. Out of all the startups in the country over time that have received venture capital, think about the statistics. The success rate is 8.64%. That's after you receive capital. So, this is a high stakes game. This is not for the faint of heart. It's a long-term play in most cases. I've been working with founders and, this is not something where you're in and out in 3 years.
Yeah.
And you look at a lot of founders today who are coming either in or out of the job market, and you look at their resume and their average tenure in a position's a year or a year and a half. And it's like, I sit down with them and say, are you ready for a 10-year commitment? Because your past track record, even if you've been successful, has shown that you've jumped from job to job to job. And you're going to have to stick with this for 10 years or 8 years.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, 7 years. So that's probably one of the main factors I look at for founders is I give them advice. First question out of the box is, do you have the capacity and the willingness and the ability to be in this for a long term?
I love that. And you're really talking about like a misconception, which is like this idea of like, people see the sale of Instagram and they're like, oh, look, like, you just start a business and 3 years later you sell for $1 billion. Like it's a bit of the dream. Can you take us through some of the other misconceptions that you might have seen, like the mentality of the average founder has that maybe is completely skewed?
Yeah, I number one, entitlement. I think a lot of founders come in and they feel entitled to have access to venture capital, and it's no one's entitled. It's a very competitive marketplace. If you think about a venture capital firm here in Los Angeles, they probably look at 2,000, 2,500 deals a year and make 12 investments.
Yeah.
So think of the competitive nature of just getting access to that capital is intense. And I think the other thing is a lot of people create problems that don't exist and then find a solution for that problem. And it's not big enough. Look, anybody can go start a business and be successful in that business, but to scale it and to have an exit with a 10x or 25x or 100x on capital in just doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen to everybody. It happens to a very elite group of folks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the challenge that people don't understand. That you're not entitled to the money. Two, you got to have a big enough problem. So as I talk with founders, my second question is, do you have the stomach to stay in this for a long time? Is your problem a big enough problem?
Yeah.
Is it, and do you have a disruptive solution to that problem, or are you making a better mousetrap? Better mousetraps don't necessarily scale as easily as disruptive technologies or disruptive service industries. So I think you have to have a big enough market, a big enough problem. You have to have a solution that can scale fast enough in order to make that happen. And people don't think that through as they start this off. And that's one of the roles of the Precelerator. We bring people in, they're pre-MVP, they're pre-market fit, and we help them figure out, is this a good market for you? Or do you have to pivot? Is this a big enough market? Is it scalable enough for us to take this to a venture firm and have them make, a seed investment of a couple $100,000 or $500,000?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's really interesting because it seems like just right off the bat, first of all, they just don't understand. As you said, there are different ways of going about businesses. And I think early on, people don't really understand these different paths and don't really think of like how they align with what they're trying to do, right? So like VC, as you mentioned, of companies that are financed, it's probably about 2% of the total companies that are 8% of those are successful in the end. Those are very low odds. That's 0.08% of a chance of, if you're starting a startup, to be able to be successful going down the venture route. So yeah, I totally understand. Like, I think everyone thinks I need venture capital money, and most people don't even understand what that means. They've just been sold a dream, which is kind of interesting.
But that's the society we live in. We live in a society of risk takers, of entrepreneurship, and we foster that. And look, I go back to the old adage of when Edison was inventing the light bulb. How many times did he try to make a light bulb before he found the one that worked?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 10,000 times. So you have to have a lot of fortitude and dedication.
Yeah,
and you
totally.
have to be passionate and believe in what you're doing.
And learning the process as well, right? Because like it's been 50 years we've been doing this now since Silicon Valley started building startups. There are better ways than others. and a lot of people, I think, start sort of, starting from scratch, looking all over the internet for YouTube videos to try to figure stuff out. And that probably worked when there weren't any resources. But it's a different game.
Yep.
So
and today, it's easy. All you need is a laptop or a tablet and access to the internet. It's the advent of Web 2.0 and having the infrastructure where we can just log on and talk to one another live, real time, is a real game changer. And the whole mobile movement is a real game changer. And if you go back just a short 10 years ago or 15 years ago, these technologies were just developing. The pathway to create a company, especially a tech company built on bits, is today very easy, but 10, 15 years ago not so easy. It took a lot more infrastructure, it took a lot more hardware. Today you don't need a lot of hardware. Everything's stored in the cloud. You need electricity and you need a laptop, and you're off and running.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's like those major shifts, right? There was like open source, then there was sort of cloud. I would argue that now there's sort of no code is coming in and playing a big part. But basically, I think that, as we move along, things are progressing very quickly. And at
5G,
any given time.
5G is kind of the next technology.
5G, which is going to enable everything.
Now, if you look at AR, VR, it's had a lot of trouble kind of launching and getting, people to adopt it as a way of looking at the world and managing businesses and promoting businesses. Well, 5G is going to change that because it's going to make it a whole lot easier, and it's going to democratize it, where people will have access to high-speed streaming and virtual reality and 3D type experiences without changing their hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 5G is going to sort of rise the whole tide in all boats, because there are certain experiences that can just go to such a next level once they're powered with much quicker and more reliable mobile internet. I actually ran an event with Verizon was it last year? Yeah, it was at the end of last year. And it was super interesting to see how it was going to be deployed, how sort of in Asia it's being deployed quicker. But just in general, we had some specialists come in from all industries. And gaming, AR, VR, I think marketing is going to really change in the sort of experiences that we can provide with marketing. So it's really exciting, actually. But I think basically what it gives, founders always have to be on the pulse so that they're not doing yesterday's way and leveraging the opportunities that are constantly being opened up today.
Yeah, right. So let's go back to founders and some of the attributes I find that are really, really important. Aside from being very smart, very driven, and very passionate, you have to be very coachable. You have to understand that when you have advisors around you, they're there for a purpose, and they're a resource that you should be using to improve your product, improve your service, your delivery, or pivot. If you don't have the ability to change direction quickly, and once you realize things are not working well, you're going to fail, and you're going to fail fast.
And so, what are the type of founders that you usually see that are a little bit less coachable? Is it a personality thing? Is it an age thing?
I think it's a personality thing. I think it's a stubbornness. I think sometimes too passionate, that their way is the only way, and they can't see the forest through the trees. So this is so that becomes a huge challenge for venture firms, for angel investors, for accelerator programs that are working with founders that aren't coachable. So as I look at the myriad of applications I get, and I have conversations with these startup founders, I'm looking for coachability as one of the attributes, and a willingness and a curiosity to learn. Because that's what's going to drive a better product.
Absolutely. I felt a similar thing when running Startup Boost LA. I mean, it was this whole thing of, some people just come in and they're not coachable. And sometimes what I found is sometimes it's based on having a lot of industry experience, not startup experience. And it's that inability of stepping away and being building a startup is very different than being very good in the corporate world, for example. Right. And so, and getting people who have, been accustomed to great results in their professional career, and are now transitioning into self-employment, startup world, whatever, and they kind of have a difficulty to like realign with what that means, right? Because I think we develop these identities, and then it becomes complicated. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think another challenge I've seen for some founders is the relationships that they bring with them as co-founders, or people that have been on the team since the beginning, and making sure that there's a good fit there, that you're on the same page, that you have the same goals, that the path that you've decided to take is mutually agreed upon, because those partnerships can fall apart very fast and destroy a company.
Yeah. A lot of people think that it's like because of outside forces, sort of competition and all that, the companies fail. And the reality is that like it's usually
It's an internal
founder
issue.
disputes. Yeah.
So let's talk about things positive. What makes a good, successful founder and entrepreneur? And I was at a seminar or a workshop a couple years ago, and there was a Bay Area investor talking about some of the things he saw in the difference between Southern California and Northern California founders. And it was an interesting observation. When I talk about Los Angeles, we are Hollywood. We are creators. We are innovators. We should be good storytellers. But the fact is, most of our founders are not good storytellers. And the Bay Area has done a good job of training people on how to be good storytellers, at least to investors, because they've had a good success rate in raising money. So I think a lot of focus and energy should be put into how do we tell our story? What is the thing that's going to convey to me as an investor from you as a founder, your passion, your vision, your ability to execute, that you have the solution to a very big problem, and I need to bet on you. So sometimes we'll see good storytellers get funding, and we scratch our head because their product is crap, or they're not. We don't see a pathway forward for that company, but they've been good storytellers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that it's like the same thing. I think like when a venture capitalist probably gets sold by a company on a story, he believes in the ability of those founders to recreate a similarly good story to get customers, probably, and also
That's
a
right.
similar good story to bring on board more talent and to do all the things that you need to get done. I love that. Wow, that's a super astute observation.
Another thing that founders that have a great understanding of who their customer is and how it's acquired, not from a macro view, but from a micro view. When you're telling that story, how do you get that first customer, and what's that experience, and how do you get to number 10 and then to 100? Because if you can't tell the story of how you acquire those customers and what their experience is, I don't care if you have $1 trillion TAM. That doesn't mean anything to me, because you're never going to access it if you can't access the first adopters of your service or product.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. So what kind of advice would you give to founders in today's sort of market? Someone who's maybe looking to start, they're not really sure whether they should get into it or not, or maybe they have an idea and they're about to start executing. Like what would what are some things that you've learned that you think would be positive for them to think about now?
Be very clear about what problem you're solving, and that it's a big enough problem for people to care about that it's solved.
Yeah.
And don't create a problem that needs to be solved, because it's not going to scale. It's not going to go far. So and then be able to tell that story and do it very clearly. Have good tech.
Yeah.
Make sure you have good tech, or access to good tech. And we can talk hours about what that means. I think sometimes people get too singularly focused on one operating system over another. I think sometimes founders try to be perfectionists, and they delay a launch because it's not perfect. And I think in go-to-market strategies and competition, it's the first out of the gate that gets noticed. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can perfect it as you go along. let's look at services like Zoom, and how much market share does Zoom have or had before COVID, and then how it was able to ramp up. Now, it wasn't perfect. People found security holes and whatever, and they've patched it up. And during that time, what happened? Well, Cisco improved their product. Microsoft improved their product. So all of a sudden, the competition started to see where they could take advantage in a competitive marketplace. So make sure you have the tech drilled down. It doesn't have to be perfect, and launch quickly.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
your market.
Love it. So let's take a little step back. I'd love to learn a little bit of some of the lessons that you've learned at Lava, and sort of running the Los Angeles
Venture Association.
Venture Association. Sorry.
Well, it started out as a way to bring deal flow to high net worth individuals 35 years ago, 1984, 36 years ago. And it was a bunch of, advisors to a A-lister actor in town who had money to put into companies. And, every time he wanted to invest in something, he was told no. So he turned it around and said, don't tell me no, bring me things I should invest in. And while they were successful in bringing him, companies to invest in, they said, oh, this is kind of fun. We're looking at deals. We can bring other people in. We can help, people get their businesses started. And that was the germination of the Los Angeles Venture Association. I came into it in 2007. So think about timing of all this. The dot-com boom and bust of 2000, 2001 had already happened. Web 2.0 was starting to come online. The infrastructure for the internet was evolving very quickly. And then we had the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009.
Yep.
At the time, Lava was doing monthly breakfasts. The people that were coming to the organization were a bunch of guys that looked like me, white-haired, suit and ties. Not a lot of founders, not a lot of women, not a lot of diversity. And we took that opportunity in 2008, 2009 to reinvent the organization and go back and say, and this is, like a true startup, who is our customer? How do we serve that customer? What are their pain points? What can we do to help alleviate those pain points?
Yeah.
And what Lava identified was, the tier one entrepreneurs in town, they don't need Lava's help. They have their network. They know who to go to for funding. They may be serial entrepreneurs, so they have a track record. It's the people that have never done this before, had nowhere to go. And we created programs around serving that community and doing a good job, I think. We got a couple winners. We had a lot of people find out that venture capital was not the space for them.
Yeah.
So just educating the community at large what the marketplace was. And Silicon Beach was kind of evolved naturally because, Santa Monica was the hotbed of where investors wanted to work and live. There was no magic to Santa Monica. Santa Monica doesn't have a 4-year university doing research and spitting out technology, but it's right next door to UCLA. It's right down the train tracks to USC. So the Expo line was a big win, I think, for Silicon Beach. And the ability for the city of LA to develop Playa Vista, and for Culver City to develop its properties and commercial properties to invite tech to come in. Santa Monica is a very expensive place to do business, and it's not a great place to grow a business because there's not a lot of space to do that. So, we expanded in the beach area. Silicon Beach expanded itself. And, I think the folks in Pasadena might have some challenge with the name Silicon Beach because they're not near the beach. They're 40 miles away from the beach. But it encompasses, as we talk about Silicon Beach, it encompasses all of us. And there's been influencers that helped do that, that helped build the first incubators or accelerators like Amplify and Mucker, at least in the beach area. But go back 25 years, 30 years. Our big win in Southern California and Los Angeles is Idea Lab. Bill Gross in Idea Lab was doing this stuff 20, 30 years ago and understood that if he had an idea that he could incubate it and fund it and do it internally and bring resources together and find the best and brightest entrepreneurs to come in and found these companies with him.
I love it.
And from that came GeoCities, and from that came Overture, which Yahoo bought.
That's amazing.
And that was one of the seminal moments of I think of Los Angeles, where all of a sudden we had people not only with money because they had some good exits, but they had some great experience in how to build startup companies on the internet. And I'll attribute most of that to Bill Gross and his efforts. The other huge attribute that people forget about Los Angeles is that we have a huge number of research institutions in our backyard right here. Some of them people have never heard of. Who's heard of HRL, Hughes Research Lab, up next to Pepperdine off Malibu Canyon Road? People never heard of that. It's just doing its thing. You have City of Hope doing cancer research. You have Cedars-Sinai. You have UCLA. You have Caltech and JPL. I think they propagate the most number of patents in the country on an annual basis.
Wow.
And Caltech's 1,200 students. It's not a big institution, but they do a good job. And you have 5 UCs in Southern California, all doing research. You have the state university system now getting into the entrepreneurial education business and having schools of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship programs. Cal State Northridge, Cal State Los Angeles, Cal State Dominguez Hills, Cal State Long Beach. They all have dynamic programs teaching people entrepreneurship and how to start companies. So compare that to the Bay Area. They have Stanford, they have Berkeley, and they have Santa Clara University and San Jose State and San Francisco State and USF and a couple UCSF and a couple of schools up there, but you can't compare the numbers to what we have here in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is the #1 graduate of engineers in the country. We produce the most number of engineers in the country out of any other part of the country. I mean, that's an amazing statistic.
Yeah,
so we
absolutely.
have the talent. The talent's here. It's how do we keep them here? How do we attract them?
And it's interesting. There's a lot of sort of investment folks that are coming down from San Francisco now, understanding why they need a presence in LA. I think there's a lot of moving pieces. And now I also see so many people sort of moving to LA to start their businesses. I think that it's this really interesting place where it's if you bring together the tech and the investors and the media, because this is a media hub, and sort of this Hollywood side of things where there's I think it just really lends itself to a lot of different types of startups, not only just to build out the tech, but also to bring it to market and to have all the sort of actors that can help you sort of get customers and build partnerships.
And sure, because we have 10 million people in the county. Yeah. So when you're looking for a product market fit within diverse communities, you don't have to go very far. It's an inexpensive venture to go out and test the marketplace and find customers. And if it works here in LA, you can probably move it to anywhere else very easily.
I love it.
The other thing is that, Los Angeles was, we think of it as Hollywood, but it's an aircraft industry, hub and a defense industry hub. So now you're talking cybersecurity and you're talking about space. SpaceX is a great example of the resurgence of the aerospace industry in Los Angeles. But, the big players never left. Boeing has been manufacturing aircraft here forever. You have Raytheon. You have all these big companies down in El Segundo and near the airport. We have an accelerator program there. Starburst and Techstars is partnered with them and running that new aerospace accelerator program. That's a great thing to see happen. And then you have Hollywood and all the influencers and all the pizzazz that comes with that. The challenge with Hollywood is these big, huge multinational companies aren't great with innovation. They struggle with innovation.
Yeah.
And what happens when you have a Viacom or a Disney or a Sony that struggles with innovation, Netflix, Apple, Amazon come in and they start taking market share.
Yeah.
And using technology to do that.
It's so interesting how this whole thing has evolved, because I feel like it's exploding right now, and it's not looking like it's going to slow down. To the contrary, and so it's a very exciting time to actually be in LA. You actually mentioned a really interesting point as we were talking earlier, that you went through the entire sort of you were really in a prime spot in sort of venture capital, or like, as well, like sort of startups and all that, when the big recession hit of 2008, 2009. Are there any lessons that you've learned from that you think could be interesting to tell founders, to tell other people, in regards to what we're going through now?
Well, sure. Number one, it's a great time to start a company. When things are dire, when people are looking for new things to do. There was a huge influx of laid off people in 2008, 2009 that were looking for things to do. So the talent pool grew. So there were good people that had great jobs, or good attorneys or whatever, good service providers that dove into the entrepreneurship world with their vast resources of contacts, because it really comes down to relationships when you're raising money. So people who have deep Rolodexes or deep contact lists that they can use to bring resources to a new company, that's good fertilizer.
And Uber, Airbnb, they all came like from 2008.
That's right. That's right.
I think
and look at them
Stripe as
now.
well.
Yeah, look at them now. So they're billion-dollar unicorn companies, multi-billion-dollar companies.
So it's a great time to start a business. I love that. Any other insights or that you saw go down during that time that might be interesting?
I think if you're going to start a company and you see it's going south, fail fast. Don't be afraid to fail. I'll tell a story. I won't name the names of the people, but company that was started, they had a solution, they tested it out, they realized midstream in having a term sheet offered to them that it wasn't going to work. And they went back to their investor and said, we can't take your money. This is not going to work. And they were worried that they kind of blew their reputation by doing that. I said, no, I think people would respect the fact that you had the wherewithal to say, no, this isn't working. We have to, and we can't pivot. We're gonna have to do something different.
I love that, because to the contrary, right? That earns you a lot of respect in the longer term, and I think it also it also is this. I don't know. It's so often that people double down when things are going bad. They're like, oh, double or nothing. You lose at the roulette, and then you're just like, okay, let's put everything on black, and you're just, it's double or nothing. And I think that people who kind of don't take action when they see results clearly, and they're like, this is a clear problem, and we either have to pivot or to figure out another way, and I think the more people fall in love with their ideas too, the harder it is to get them away from it. So that I love the fail fast. It's like build fast, test fast, fail fast, or grow fast.
That's right. Those are your options. Another insight, I think, is there's a lot of new and different funding opportunities to grow and scale companies. It doesn't have to be just venture capital anymore. The Jobs Act changed that with crowdfunding and doing a CF funding. Now you have to make a strategic decision. Do I want to do a crowdfund, or do I want to do a venture capital funding? Are they mutually exclusive? Not necessarily, but if you have 1,000 people on your cap table, I doubt a venture capital firm is going to be very interested in coming in. But there's ways of doing a crowdfunding where you have one entity on the cap table through a special purpose vehicle and doing it that way and keeping it clean. So there's new money out there. There's family office money that's a lot more adventurous today than it was 10 years ago as far as putting money into companies. And I would say family office money is getting smarter. They're hiring, fund managers with experience who know how to vet good companies and make good investments. They don't necessarily always bring the same resources that venture capital brings, industry domain, but money's money. and I wouldn't turn it down if I had the right terms.
That's
So
interesting.
there's new asset classes of money coming into this high risk, high reward, high failure place of doing business.
Yeah, actually, I spoke to one of the guys at Indie VC. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm familiar with them.
Jason,
Sure.
who sort of joined as an entrepreneur in residence, and they're building out a product right now. They have a newsletter about alternative funding mechanisms and other. And I think it's really important that people just understand that it's not like either you get a VC to fund you or you can never build the company you want.
Yeah,
I think
it's not an either or anymore.
Yeah, it's important to just explore all these things and to be aware, I think, and to have options and just figure out which options align with your needs and your ambition.
I love the Start Engine story, Howard Marks and what he's built. I mean, I remember when Howard started Start Engine, and I went and visited with him, and he says, I want to invest in 100 companies and hopefully a couple of them will stick. But he wasn't putting enough money in to each of the companies to make it worthwhile. And that experiment didn't work for him. And Howard's a smart man. He pivoted and he started this crowdfunding platform even before the Jobs Act was, fully cemented. And, he tried and failed and tried and failed, and he finally got it. And, he's raising a lot of money for local companies and companies all over the country using that platform. And, that's one of the things that you got to look at as far as, what works and what doesn't work. And I think some accelerators have found the same kind of thing. Is it worthwhile providing space, co-working space, and in mentoring and workshops if you're not putting enough money in to sustain the company, if you're not giving them a pathway? So they've had to adapt their models. And, I think if you look at, I have a map in my book of all the accelerator and incubator programs in Los Angeles. And I think this is from about 5 or 6 years ago. And there were dozens. I mean, I think at one count, I had like 35 to 50 programs identified. And that's not true today. There's been a consolidation. A lot of universities have taken on that role. I've lost count as to how many incubators, accelerators USC has.
Yes, that's hilarious. I was actually navigating through that because I was talking to sort of James Bottom, who's running the exactly the Blackstone Excel. And then it was like I talked to someone else, and they're, oh yeah, but there's also this and there's that, and I'm like, what? How many do they have?
They don't know because they don't talk to one another. It's one of the challenges of these institutions of higher learning is that they're very siloed, and one silo doesn't know what the next silo is doing, and so it's still kind of guerrilla warfare out there in many cases.
Yeah, a lot of stuff's developing, and I think that the more that we sort of like all get together and try to create this and understand we're part of the same ecosystem, we're kind of all fighting the same fight. I think that's when there's going to be a lot of great partnerships happening on that front too.
If you look at some, a lot of the venture capital firms in town, where if you're looking what their investment thesis is and what they like, SaaS is probably the number one answer you're going to get from people. Enterprise SaaS, where you have revenues. I think 5 or 6 years ago, people were more worried about eyeballs and click-throughs and no revenues, and people today are hyper focused on revenues.
Yeah.
If you don't have a pathway to revenue, it's very difficult to get funding.
Oh yeah, and if you're not like there was a statistic. It's like from in 2010, deals going towards companies that were generating revenue was only like 10% of the deals were going to people who were actually generating revenue. And like 7 years later, 2017, the number's like 50%, and now it's like way more like 75%. So it's like, and it's something I think not a lot of people know, and they just have to understand. Today, you have to build a business before expecting capital.
Right.
It doesn't mean
a business that makes money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's what everybody's in it for.
Yeah, exactly. So Len, tell me what are you excited about, and what influence do you want to have in the LA ecosystem?
What am I excited about? My personal bias is actually outside of the thesis of the Precelerator. I like science. I like stuff that's coming out of labs where there's real science solving big problems. The challenge with life science investing is that the term is such a long time because there's regulatory approvals that need to happen, and you really have to test your product to make sure it's safe.
It's very capital intensive.
It's capital intensive, but those are the bets that I look at, like Kite Pharmaceuticals. I look at Puma Biotech. I look at Kyocera, some of the big life science firms that have come out of Los Angeles, and those are the things that really excite me, because there's a lot of problems in the world to solve, and I think venture capital should be working on solving those bigger problems. I don't know if it should be working on solving the next e-commerce platform to sell a widget. That's just me. Now, you can make money selling widgets using an e-commerce platform and in a new marketplace, and it may be disruptive, but is it solving a big enough problem that's going to serve mankind? And so social impact is really important to me personally. So I think industries that can tackle that are in the life science area, maybe in the AR area, AI for sure. I think computing capacity and quantum computing is a huge area that is going to explode and give us the capacity to solve problems faster and in a bigger way.
I love that. No, I love that view. I think you've been doing a terrific job. So I'm sure that the trajectory you started on will continue to go in the same direction. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I know that we have other commitments coming now on both our ends, but yeah, where can people find you if they want to sort of reach out to you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile, it has my contact information in the LinkedIn profile. You can look up Precelerator with 2 C's .com, and that will get you to our website. And there's an application if you're a founder and you're looking for some acceleration, and you think that our accelerator, which, by the way, we're the only accelerator in the country that I know of that is backed by a law firm. So the legal services we deliver are premium legal services. They're the best in the business. And to have that attribute behind you as a differentiator is good for us. I think where we are in Santa Monica is also a great place to be, because we have access to so many mentors and so many people who've been successful in this industry, giving good advice to our startups, our cohorts, and the perks package that we've developed. So I think you can find me there. You can find me in a lot of different places within the ecosystem. And hopefully soon we'll be able to meet in person again, because I hope there's a light at the end of this tunnel coming to us. Yeah,
because I really loved you guys' in-person events too in the space. I went and saw the founder of Ring as well there. So I really hope we go back to normal so we can all say hi in person again. But
that's right.
But in the meantime, I thank you so much, Len, for joining and for sort of sharing some of your insight. I know it's enormously valuable, and I appreciate it.
Christian, thank you so much. Anytime I can be helpful to you or to any of the listeners here today, please reach out.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.